The 1986 full-length animated Transformers movie was a pivotal moment for G1. They killed off a lot of the old characters, introduced new ones, but today I'm going to talk about these new characters, their masterpiece representations, and whether you like them or not. Coming up! Now, I've talked about some of these characters, probably all of these characters, several times in the past, but I'm going to compile all of this into one video so we can kind of have an idea of what's going on with the 1986 movie crew. I do know a lot of collectors say they really only want to do Season 1 and Season 1, Season 2, but eventually if you collect Masterpiece Transformers long enough, you get into these movie characters. And so today, I'm talking about this, and we're going to start with Ultra Magnus. Now, so far, the best Ultra Magnus for a G1 representation to match the 86 movie would be Takara. Takara still looks the best. Now, I don't think it's the best that can ever get made. I would like to see a better one come along, but as of right now, it's still the best option out there. The KFC Citizen Stacks figure is really cool, but it's kind of surprising because almost everything else KFC makes is super toon accurate. This is a stylized take. It's much bigger. It is very tall, and I like the proportions to it, but it's not a G1. It is not matching the cartoon or the movie very well at all. So next I want to talk about Springer. I really don't understand to this day why so many companies have represented this character, has gone after this character. It doesn't make sense that there are 6 versions of this, but only one version of Ultra Magnus, unless of course a good old Takara put their foot down and said, don't make an Ultra Magnus. Now that would kind of make sense, right? And they never said don't make a Springer. So anyway, looking at this, there's 6 different options, and we're going to start off with Fans Toys. I do think Fans Toys is the best one right now that's available, but he is a little bit bulky. Now I know the character is bulky, and a lot of people would say that the Fans Toys is perfect. It is not perfect, but it has a very premium paint, a premium heft, a premium feel, and for that he actually commands quite a presence on your shelf. All the modes look pretty good, the car mode being the weakest. I would say second up, or number 2 or runner up, would be the MMC, but the MMC version, the proportions I like better. I actually like it better as an action figure. Doesn't really match the character 100%, maybe not 100%, but I do like the way it looks. And again, MMC doesn't ever try to go 100% G1, 100% toon, so I was kind of surprised they went as close as they did with this guy, and I think he looks pretty good. I hear nothing but good things about him. He is painted relatively well, and everyone says he feels pretty solid, and the transformation is relatively decent, as with most MMC figures. Now, Open and Play Big Spring is the biggest surprise in this because it is the cheapest option around, and it was pretty good. It is pretty good. I have this figure. I like this figure, and the downside to it is, people complain about the head sculpt, which I don't think is horrible, but it's probably not the best head sculpt around. And the other thing that people complain about is it feels kind of cheap. I don't think it really feels cheap as much as it just lacks the finish, the premium finish you would expect on a Masterpiece figure. Very little paint and just a lot of bare plastic. But there's no paint to scratch, and this thing is a relatively simple transformation compared to some of the other triple changers out there. So I do think it's a good figure and definitely a good option. Now there is the Springer Allen. This is the Unique Toys Allen. This one here is big and bulky like the character would be, but it's big, bulky, and rounded bulky, not kind of the sharp edges that I would expect to see with this character. I think the roundedness of this guy is what threw me off, but I had him, and I thought he was kind of fun, and the transformation is pretty simple. I actually think the transformation is better on this than even the Open and Play Big Spring, which is touted to be able to just open the box and transform it without instructions. This guy here is relatively simple and on the same line of the Open and Play when it comes to transformation. I still think the X-Transbots Virtus will be the best. It will be the best looking. It will match the screen counterpart the most. I am looking forward to this figure. I've already got it bought and paid for. Looking forward to when it gets released. X-Transbots, please stop with the reissues and get this guy out. I've been looking forward to it for over 2 years. Bought and paid for, wanting this guy to come in. He does look great, but if you're last, you got to be best. And last we've got Toy World Spanner. It wasn't the last one to get released, but I kind of wanted to talk about it separately because it doesn't really match the 1986 movie version. Toy World went their own route with this. A lot of people say it is IDW inspired, so I am not 100% sure about that, but it does not match the movie. I wouldn't use it for that, but it's an interesting one to look at. This slides us right into the Toy World Cup, their Toy World Crank, which again doesn't really match the tune very well. It's their own style. It's way different, but it's something I figured I'd show just for a lot of fun. I think a lot of people forgot about this guy. Right now, the best one on the market that's available is the Fans Toys Coot, which is a nice looking figure, a bit of a complex transformation, but I do like the way he looks. He looks good in both modes, and he looks really great on the shelf. Kind of looking at this guy for a couple of years now makes me change my thought of what the character should look like, because I've been looking at this as my representation, but we also have X-Transbots coming out. Well, let me just say, theoretically, X-Transbots has theirs on the way, and X-Transbots may actually be more tune accurate. A lot of people have pointed that out to me, that some of the things that I'm liking less about this than I do with the Fans Toys is because this is more accurate, more screen accurate. X-Transbots, Fans Toys both go for that absolute perfect screen accuracy, and here we go. We might just get it with the X-Transbots version. And Fans Toys Jabber is the best one out right now. That one does look really good. I like pretty much everything about it. The transformation is overly complex, and there are too many points that feel like you can break something if you're not extremely careful. It's a bit scary of a transformation, but it really does look good in both modes. And in fact, pretty much all of the Fans Toys options look good in both modes, in all modes. And so for that, I do think that this was a necessary release, but there was a time where I thought it was completely unnecessary because we had Unique Toys. Now, Unique Toys is still a decent option, a good option. It is even taller than the Fans Toys one, but once I got the Fans Toys, I realized that the Unique Toys one was lacking in a few areas, some of the presentation, some of the aesthetic, and some of the paint, but it's still not a bad option. If you pick one of these up, I'm sure you'd be really happy with it. So next up, we're going to talk about some RC options. This is one of those that, yes, I cannot say that anybody has nailed RC. The thing about it is that there are so many different options of her, and yet none of them really match the tune 100%. Now, a lot of people do try to say Fans Toys matches the best, and we have Takara coming out with their option. We're going to take a closer look at that. But I don't think any of them are 100% there yet. Frankly, I'm surprised they haven't reissued Rouge. I think that figure has been more highly sought after lately, but it seems like one of those things that Fans Toys does. They wait for a figure to be in high demand, reissue a very small quantity, and I would have thought that would have happened with this one. This one has its own issues, and maybe they don't ever want to put her back out again because she does have some issues. All of the thin parts on her make her very fragile, and when you look at the chest, you can see that it doesn't like clip in all the way. Every time I pick her up, you got to pick her up and be careful because the whole chest can just kind of fall apart. You got to put her back together. When you're just manipulating her, moving her around, that's one of the issues I have. And I know some people say they don't have that issue, but there's problems with this figure. So Takara's coming out with theirs, and she does have that saggy chest syndrome, but I still think overall she does look like the best one out there. She does match the character very well. Massive backpack on her though, and I have to admit, probably the biggest backpack out of all of the options that we have. And so for that, she's kind of a shell former. I'm sure she's going to be a shell former and just fold up in there. But there's only so many ways you can make RC transform. But what are you going to do with all that kibble unless you make it removable? I think Takara is really afraid of doing parts forming. I think this character needs parts forming. This character either needs parts forming or just needs to be an action figure. Now, MMC is a really good action figure, a really good transformer, and a really good figure. She's not 100% Toon inspired. She is really close, but then again, a bit stylized. I liked this figure. I thought I was not going to like her because she is so short, she's so small. She's almost Chug small. That's how small she is. But she's fun to mess with. She looks really good, and it really doesn't look bad on your shelf next to other G1 figures, and the transformation is great. The tallest figure out of all of these is Toy World's Leia. Now, Toy World was going for their own scale back in the day when they made this figure, and I think this figure looks really good. Very toon, not 100% toon, but really close to toon accurate. And again, a lot of the Toy World figures weren't. At the time this was coming out, they weren't making toon accurate figures. I thought she looked really good. She looks great next to Rodimus or the MP09, simply because of the fact that she is tall, but the alt mode does kind of suck. Looking here, most of the alt modes look pretty good. Toy World's alt mode in the top right looks absolutely terrible, so some of the people hold that against the Toy World version. Now looking at Rodimus. Rodimus is one of the better figures aesthetically. I think he looks really good, really matches his on-screen counterpart. On the left, you see Takara. On the right, you see the Hasbro release. I haven't really seen anybody come out with one that is better than this, but it's extremely fragile, so you could break it, transforming it very easily. You could actually just break it by manipulating it. I've seen a lot of crazy breakage pictures out there on this guy. I haven't broken any of mine. I've got a couple of them. I like them. I like the character. I like the display on the shelf. Some people don't like the face, but this is a good figure aesthetically. Now DX9 made their carry. The DX9 carry does not match the toon as much, but you can tell it's Rodimus. You can tell what character it is by looking at it, and he is solid. Now this figure is not one that you're really going to break when you transform it, and my understanding is the entire Winnebago mode is packed up on him, so you could turn this into the Winnebago mode and not have to add an extra piece like you do with the MP09. Now, a lot of people look at the 1986 movie cast and they really talk about blasters being in it, so I'm going to include this here. This guy here comes from KFC. It's really the only Masterpiece option available. He's not perfect, with a bit of kibble on his arms. Here and there he has some kibble, but he is great. Compared to anything else that you could possibly want to put on your Masterpiece shelf, like I did with the Titan Returns or the G1 figure, this one looks the best. And Fans Toys hinted at one coming that might come in 2028. Who knows? This thing's here now. You can get the shiny or the flat. I have the shiny. I prefer the shiny metallic. A lot of people say it flakes. Mine didn't flake. Also the cassettes everyone complains about, they're okay. For what they do, for the price, I like them. They match the Masterpiece Takara, but MMC's got some coming. That would be even better. And for Wheelie, there really is only one option, and it's the X-Transbots Ollie. Now, there's been 3 different iterations and versions of this guy, and they've made improvements along the way. I actually had the first version, and he was a little bit loose and floppy, but I still like the way he looked, and after you manipulate him and get him to stand and pose him or whatever, he looks okay. He looks great. Both modes look good. Transformation's not the end of the world. It's just a mini-bot, and the thing about this is there's not going to be a whole lot of interest from any other company, especially not Takara, to make another version of this. Ollie might be all we get of this character for a long time. We have a really old Just a Toys version also, if you want to track one of those down. They're actually not very expensive. I do think Ollie looks way better aesthetically, but this thing is made of die-cast. It's heavy duty. It is strong, sturdy, and stout. He's a little bit taller too, I think. There's a couple of versions of this same mold floating around. Some of it was KO'd or whatever. I don't know. I've got one. I might even do a review on it one day. So for Preceptor, really, I've tried to make other options out there that you could go for. Tesla's about it. Fans Toys Tesla is all there really is when it comes to this character. It's the best version. The 1.0 is great. The 2.0 is definitely a marked improvement over the 1.0, but it's still nowhere to be found anytime soon. FD46, maybe it comes out next year. Who knows? It would be nice, but there's no guarantees in life. But if you could track down a Tesla 1.0, this is probably the right time to do it. Getting into the bad guys in this mix, the dark side of the equation, we're going to talk about Sovereign. So we're going to get started with Galvatron the Leader. Now, there was a while that I just didn't want to get the Sovereign. I didn't want to spend the money because I already had the DX9 version. I do admit, I will openly admit that this is the better of the 2 versions, this versus DX9, but Fans Toys actually has their own 2 versions. On the left is the newest one that came out, the M, and on the right is the older one. It's a little bit more blue. I believe I got that right on this picture. But anyway, both options look great, and one's supposed to be more movie, one's supposed to be more toon. which one. Okay, left was the first one, right was the second one. Now the DX9 option isn't bad, and when you have the DX9 in hand, you have it in your display, you can tell that it's Galvatron, and you're like, why do I need to spend another 160, which is now looking at 220, or maybe 400, who knows, to get your hands on a Sovereign of any version. But the DX9 looks good enough, and if you can catch it on a good deal, it's definitely worth having in your display. The Sovereign, I think, is superior, but there are things about the DX9, such as the alt mode is a little bit better. There's some details here and there, just depends on what you want it for, but I do think the Fans Toys is better. But is it twice as good, 3 times as good? Probably not. Next up we have Fans Toys Quietus, and the cool thing about this figure here is he really does match the on-screen very well. He is really a thin version of the character, and he is a very high premium figure. He's got a great paint job, looks good, feels good, everything about him. There's 2 different versions. Now this one, the left is the T model and the right is the first one that came out. They look so close, they're really hard to tell. Even on my shelf, I can tell the difference side by side on my shelf. But really, if I was out in the wild, I'd have to look a little closer to tell you which one was which. But it does look really good. Now the X-Transbots one doesn't look bad. Now it kind of lacks a premium paint, and it is a bit bulkier and kind of feels a little bit more like a toy than a high-end premium figure. But I think Fans Toys really did analyze the transformation and what X-Transbots did with theirs to make theirs. So Fans Toys said, here's what X-Transbots did, and let's improve on that and make a better one. I truly feel like that's what happened, because it feels like you got pretty much the same toy. It's just like 2.0 version of that toy. But then again, I mean, I could be wrong, but that's really how I feel as a collector buying and having both of these characters. Next up, we're going to talk about the Scourge. Really, the only Scourge out there is X-Transbots. X-Transbots did a good job. The first release, I think, looks much more Toon accurate than the second release. The colors are a little bit closer to Toon. And in the second release, they wanted to give you sort of an updated color scheme and an updated color look. Now, the thing about X-Transbots is they also offer you a swarm team, so you can get 3 more, so you get a total of 4 technically different characters with swappable faces, and there's some different parts that'll go with them and stuff, but this is the best option out there. I feel like he's a little bit short, but a lot of people point out that he's supposed to be shorter than the rest. I just don't know if he's supposed to be that much shorter than the rest. Real quick, you can see the picture on the left is the first one, on the right is the second one. That is the color differences that they made, but there are much shinier paint that has been applied to the second version, so that makes it feel pretty interesting, but I still kind of lean towards the first release color-wise a whole lot more. Now, X-Transbots is coming out with their Dr. Egg, and that is an awesome Quintesson, but it's going to be like $175. It's an expensive figure with a lot of electronics and stuff, gadgets going on with it. I really would have liked if they would have kept it under the 100 so people could buy multiples and feel good about it. I don't know anybody buying 3 of the $160 ones, and now with Hasbro mainline, and you could buy some upgrade kit to it and make it look almost as good for a fraction of the cost. Now I'm starting to wonder, is X-Transbots going to get discouraged with low sales? Possibly. Now, of course, for the longest time, we didn't have Impossible Toys and their Quintesson, but until I saw Dr. Egg and the size comparison, I didn't realize the Impossible Toys was so close to Chug. It really is the Chug to compete with or to complement your mainline figures. In fact, Hasbro's is almost twice the size of this, and Hasbro's making this for the mainline, and theirs is so much bigger than the Impossible Toys version. So next up, I want to talk about the biggest baddies of the baddies, and the biggest baddie is Unicron. Now, there are 2 options available. I guess you really have to take HasLab off the table unless you're buying secondary market only. But you have the HasLab that's going to be 27 inches, and then you have the 19-inch or like around 19-inch version from Zeta, or Studio Cell now is what they're calling it. Then you look at this and the size difference. Size is what matters. You'd want to go with the HasLab, and I can't argue the fact that the Zeta one looks better in bot mode. It looks more accurate in bot mode. If only it was a little bit bigger, like, 50% bigger, 75% bigger, but it does look pretty good. Now, looking at the HasLab one, there's a lot of kibble on it. and I hope some of it's removable. I know the back won't be removable because, of course, the whole opening mouth gimmick and all that stuff. And I hope the colors are a little bit closer. But yeah, there's kind of the debate back and forth which one's better. I think they each have good points and they each have bad points. For me, I'm going to probably, well, almost guaranteed to have my HasLab one in the alt mode and then have Zeta in bot mode. I think that's going to look the best in my display. So, of course, none of the problems are going to be a problem for me for my way of displaying. But a lot of people are going to display different options. And, of course, what you do with yours makes it the most important. So, you pick the one you want the most. And, of course, there's a slew of characters that have no real masterpiece representation just yet. Mainline is dialing those out. But let me know what you think about these. What else would you like to see in the masterpiece representation from the 1986 movie? Like, subscribe, and Titanium Hanger out.